Hi there. Thanks for taking the time to check out Posicovidity Stories, featuring individuals and organizations bringing solutions to the broader community during COVID-19 and beyond. We're so excited to have Joon and Joon here with us today. They're from Raise Uganda Now. And as we're getting started, we'd love to hear a little bit more about both of you and your backgrounds and how you got together to work on Run.
Great. So thank you, first of all, Gloria and Rudy, for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Joon Yang. I am the president and co-founder of Raise Uganda Now, or as we like to call it, Run. We run an orphanage in Uganda. We take care of 51 children between the ages of 4 and 18. And we've been doing this for the past 6 years now.
Hi, my name is Sejan Kim, and I am on the board of advisors, and I'm also the project director of Run. And I've been helping out with Run to take care of the 51 children that Joon has also mentioned in terms of education and health.
Sejan and I actually met in the Army. So we're both South Korean citizens, and we served 2 years in the military. And out of those 2 years, we both applied for and got an 8-month deployment in Lebanon. And so while we were there deployed as UN peacekeeping operation folks, we met each other. We were living in the same bunker, and we sort of got that connection rolling. And a few years later, here we are working on a very different kind of project together. But that's how we met.
Wow, that's really incredible. Tell us a little bit about how during these unique times, as we're going through this global pandemic, your team has been responding to that.
So in response to this pandemic, what we did is we created the COVID-19 task force. And the main theme when we created that was to be proactive rather than reactive, because so we first established this around like late March or early April. And at that point, that's when the pandemic really started to hit globally, and you can really see the numbers skyrocket. And it turned out, most of the developed countries were, rather than being proactive, they were being reactive once the numbers started skyrocketing. And, we as an organization understand the situation in Uganda very well. And we know that unfortunately, they don't have the proper resources or the infrastructure to respond correctly if this pandemic shows the same trend as it did in other areas. So as a response to ensure the safety of our children and staff, we created this task force that's subdivided into 4 different teams to ensure the safety and health of our children and staff.
I wanted to take a step back and talk a little bit more about the story of Run, how Run got started and why you chose Uganda as the area that you wanted to serve.
I first went to Uganda in the summer of 2012. I was still a junior in high school, and it was one of those service trips where, you say I was curious about, going to Africa at some point, and I wanted to do some type of volunteering activity, nothing too crazy. I went, stayed there for 2 weeks. Ironically, it actually was during the Ebola crisis. So my parents were calling me, watching CNN, telling me, you got to get out of there. And I was like, no, I'm going to stay. And then 2 weeks later, I went back, and that was sort of my first introduction into Uganda as a country. My key takeaway then was, as a 17-year-old, I thought, wow, this is a completely different world, and it's just as real as the one that I live in. So it just ended up being me doing 2 or so fundraisers in high school. The real inflection point happened my freshman year in college, where I got a phone call in the midst of me going to my econ final exam. And Betty, who is now the general manager, who was then just another caretaker, she gave me a phone call and said, hey, Joon, how are you doing? I said, I'm good. I'm about to go take this exam. And she goes, well, the original manager took all the money and fled, so we're going to get evicted next week. Is there anything that you can do? And 18-year-old me goes, this is a lot, but I'm going to come back to this after I take this exam. And so obviously none of the supply and demand curves are coming into my head. I, bomb this exam, and I give her a call and I say, hey, so I don't know anything about, Uganda or nonprofits, but I don't want to ignore the situation. So we got to do something. And that's how Run started. I gathered up Haley Baker, who was another co-founder, and several of my freshman year friends, and sort of we got registered as a 501c3. We did some emergency fundraisers, and then really started to rethink about what are better management practices, what are better operational practices. I think it's really difficult at times to sort of feel connected to the kind of impact that we're making, because at the end of the day, I'm in Boston, Sejin's in Buffalo, and we're working on projects that are going to impact the children's lives in Uganda. And I know that Rudy earlier asked why Uganda, and sort of I answered sort of half the question by saying, hey, by circumstance, we're going to get evicted and so on. But why did we stay in Uganda? And it's because we realized that our operational budget of around $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and running an entire orphanage and paying 12 staff members full-time salary and so on. So the people who actually get paid are in Uganda, so we create jobs there. That cannot be done in, say, Boston, Massachusetts, or anywhere, even in the suburbs of New York. I mean, it's just a dollar stretches a lot farther there. I go back to Uganda every year because I usually have a schedule to sort of meet local leaders there. We have a piece of land. We bought 2 acres of land there to build a community center in the upcoming years, and sort of to check up on the land and talk to our staff members, and most importantly, to just play with the kids, because that's sort of what it all comes down to. And I have to say, when we're going through these paperwork and doing fundraisers and thinking about hygiene programs and so on, they're extremely intellectually engaging. It's a behemoth effort to take on with an international crew. But the moment that it all becomes tangible and real is when you take that 30-hour plane ride and get there, and then you see just how real what an amalgam of your efforts have come down to, and then to see that progress every year. It's like seeing a kid grow, literally. It's like, oh my God, this kid who was 3 feet tall is now like 5 foot tall. But now also on top of that, everything that surrounds this child has changed because of the efforts that might have been looking like a PowerPoint presentation on one side. Over on here on this side, it is something super real and tangible, like a roof or a solar panel.
Actually, for me, unfortunately, I didn't have the great opportunity to visit Uganda and see the kids personally myself. But the most rewarding moment that I had as being part of Run is actually being the project director of a child sponsorship program called Project 5050, and this new COVID-19 task force that we created. And previously, I think the key advantage that really brought me the most rewarding moment of Project 5050 is, again, because it's a child sponsorship program, I was responsible with a team of other excellent members to draft the child information sheet that we can distribute to our potential sponsors. And in the process of that, you get to really understand, the characters and the history and the story of each child. And even though I wasn't able to physically meet them, matching the names to the photos to the profile and combining these pieces of puzzles together to create a child's sponsorship information was, I think, probably the most rewarding, because even though I couldn't personally see the child physically in front of me, it was enough to, give rise to the sense of this virtual relationship, which eventually turned out to an actual real relationship that I could connect to the child as well.
For sure, yeah. Every single child's life is super important and makes a huge difference on the world. To that end, I think the work that both of you have been doing is really incredible. How can other people help? What can they do to contribute to your cause?
So as I briefly mentioned previously, setting about the making of the COVID-19 task force, or CTF, and the situation that's happening in Uganda. And as I said, there's skyrocketing prices of, food and essential goods. And even though we have, because of that, we're always currently now more than ever, we're in the struggle of financial support. And for some of the food products, we've seen an increase of the inflation by almost 3 times its original amount. And, that really puts a constraint on our financial efforts. And in a response to that, what we did is we created a financial campaign through the platform Kindest. And, everyone is welcome to donate whatever amount that they can, because any amount really does have a huge impact in Uganda. And that will be very helpful.
To add a little bit to that, I think there are a lot of probably student audience here, and as having been a student until very recently myself, I know that sometimes pulling out your credit card or debit card and like, donating or taking your time to like go volunteer at, a nearby post in your neighborhood, those are still pretty difficult and challenging things. And I think a much more sort of broad thing that I think applies to just about everyone, and that I would like to urge in the sense of how can you help, is to really just care a little bit more. And care isn't about, the dollar amount or any dollar amount or the act of volunteering. I think caring just starts with not looking away. So I think that there are certain aspects of life, of the global reality that are really, really disturbing. I mean, if you're taking warm showers every day, that is your reality. Taking a shower with a cold bucket of water once every week, that doesn't sound like a reality, and you don't really want to look at it in the face. I'm not asking, or we're not asking people to go ahead and like donate money so we can change their reality per se. There are going to be people who will do that, and that's great. But I think what everyone can do is at least recognize that that is a reality. And just because you look away and turn the other side doesn't mean that it's going to go away. And so once you sort of realize that, yeah, I have to look at this as being very much a reality, that things like COVID-19 or extreme poverty or a lack of healthcare, these are realities that affect so many people, and that you just have to look at it and say, all right, I know it's really, really disturbing, and I know that it's really, really hard for me to swallow. And it's not something I want to look at every day. I would much rather watch a fun show in Netflix or something. But I think just the mere effort of looking at it in the eye and recognizing it as a reality is just the first step to caring. And then the rest of the things, whether it's volunteering or donating or whatever it is, you can do that in your own time, and those will follow suit naturally.
Absolutely agree. Just caring more, increasing your personal awareness and the awareness of those around you is definitely really key. Thank you
Which
both
is what
so
you guys
much.
are doing here. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to do that. Thank you both so much again for your time today. We really appreciated it.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for having us.